Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. When I entered, there was a flicker on the carpet in the bathroom, a reflection of the sunlight that was just beginning to make its way through the blinds. It didn't blind me, it just caught my attention. I looked down to see what was there. Since I was barefoot, I didn't want to step on glass or anything else. Caroline didn't mention that she dropped something in the bathroom, but who knew? At first I didn't notice it because without the light it was almost the same color as the carpet, but eventually I found it. A tiny circle of foil fell to the floor and reflected the light into my eyes when I entered the bathroom. I picked it up. It was the backing of a strip of pills, a small circle of foil that is squeezed out when you squeeze a tablet out of a strip. In most cases it remains attached to the strip, but sometimes, as in this case, it separates and falls to the floor. I examined her. On one side it was empty, but on the other side there was a marking. Tuesday. Since it was Wednesday, I assumed it meant Tuesday, yesterday's pill. This meant that the pills had to be taken daily. I knew I wasn't taking any medication. I was 35 years old, and I was as healthy as a cucumber, as was my wife, Caroline. We both recently underwent an annual medical examination and were found to be healthy and fit. So why was there a pill pad in my bathroom? I knew there were several pills that needed to be taken daily, but one of them that came to mind was the birth control pill. Caroline didn't take birth control pills, or at least I thought she didn't, since I had a vasectomy 2 years ago, after the birth of our second and last child. She had no problems with cramps or pain during menstruation. She was one of those lucky women who have their periods without problems. So why the pills? I must admit that my first thought was that she might have some kind of illness that she didn't want to tell me about. For a few minutes, my thoughts went into very dark places, but I remembered again about the medical examination and the fact that we showed each other the reports. We were both clean. If the little circle of foil was here, then most likely the pills were here too. I closed and locked the door. Caroline was still in bed and started looking. It took me a while to find them, but eventually I found them. They were buried at the bottom of a tampon box in a box of aspirin. When I pulled out the strip with the pills, I immediately recognized them as the ones she took before I had the operation, and even before that, between our children, when we didn't try. Why did she start taking pills again? I had only one answer to that question. She was making love to someone who could get her pregnant. She cheated on me. Caroline and I have been together for 9 years. I had just graduated from university and was studying to be an engineer, and she was working as an assistant. We met at a bar, and although we did not immediately find a common language, the interest was enough for her to accept my invitation to dinner. Caroline was tall, only a couple of centimeters shorter than my 178. She was a former athlete and retained an athletic physique, a slim figure and small breasts. Her ass, by far my favorite body part, was just amazing. We courted for about a year and then got married when I was 26. Our 2 children were 5 and 2 years old, and I had surgery to prevent any further accidents. 2 were our limit. We had the perfect set. First James was born, and then Sonia. I had a perfect family, or so I thought. Caroline returned to work, taking maternity leave for each of the children, not wanting to leave her favorite job. We had an au pair who came to look after the children during the day and went home in the evening. She was worth almost as much as Caroline earned, but Caroline didn't care. She just wanted to leave home and work at her favorite job. I worked with a couple of friends, creating an engineering firm between us. We've never been rich, but we've all been very happy. I cleaned up the bathroom, put her pills back, and decided I needed to think about it. There was no point in confronting her now. I needed a plan. I needed proof. What happens after that? I had no idea. Let's get all the facts together first and then see where it leads. I went to work as usual and thought about my options. First, I wanted to know who and when, and also how long. Was it someone at work, God forbid, her boss? Is this the person she's been talking to since we met? This led me to the next terrible question. Were these children even mine? All this time, I didn't let my emotions get in the way. I knew this would happen, that I would feel loss, betrayal, pain, and anger. But first I had to figure out if it was real. I was working on the problem, and I didn't have enough facts yet to draw any conclusions. I went online. First of all, I needed DNA analysis kits. Testing children would be, child's play. I often put them to bed before Caroline came so it could be done easily. I also ordered surveillance equipment. a couple of small dictaphones that I could hide in her car and bag, and a few tiny cameras that I would hide all over the house. I doubted she was doing it there, considering she was rarely in the house when I wasn't there. At least I didn't think so. I needed access to her phone. I knew about a cloning tool that I could use to get a copy of her phone, receive all her messages and emails, and even listen to her calls. To do this, I needed to buy another phone. It took several days for everything to be delivered. During this time, I watched her closely. Caroline didn't do anything unusual. Our love life was pretty standard, once or twice a week, usually on weekends when we both went to bed late. I never smelled anything suspicious from her, and she never took a shower as soon as she came home. Nothing has changed, so either she didn't have an affair or she was exceptionally careful, and either she had an affair for so long that it became second nature. The packages arrived on Friday morning. I asked them to send them to my office so that there would be no questions. I had DNA analysis kits, voice recorders, several cameras, a mobile phone, and a cloning kit. I was ready to work. That day, I left the office early. When I got home, the housekeeper was just feeding the children dinner before putting them to bed. I left her to deal with this case, and I went and hid the cameras. One in the bathroom, one in the living room, and the third in the bedroom, with a good view of the bed. I heard the children splashing in the bathroom and went to help them get ready for bed. I took Sonia and left the housekeeper with James. I took a swab from Sonia's cheek and put it in my pocket. Then I put her to bed and read to her until she dozed off. When I looked in on James, he was still awake, and the housekeeper was still reading to him. I offered to replace her and let her go home, and she gratefully agreed. It didn't take him long to get a swab, and in less than 20 minutes, he was also fast asleep. I packed the swabs together with the swab taken from my cheek and put them in the mailbox. The postman will pick them up in the morning. The service promised that the results would be available online within 48 business hours. So, Wednesday then. Caroline came home on time, and we went about our usual business. She told me about her day, and I told her about mine, and neither of us listened to the other. We had dinner, and then she went to take a shower. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I installed voice recorders in her car and bag, and cloned her mobile phone. I checked the clone to see if there were incriminating messages or emails, but there were none. Either she was very careful, or she didn't cheat. I couldn't decide. The weekend passed as usual. We made love both mornings before the kids woke up. It has become almost a ritual, almost even a routine. I got down on her, then we made love until I finished the job. If we managed to get to the final shot before one or the other child woke up, we considered it a victory. It was about a 50% success rate. Since she was always the first, she almost always won. She didn't have any calls or messages on weekends, and since we spent all our time together, I didn't have a chance to check if she was taking pills, although I checked the strip and the corresponding days were gone. Since it was just her and me in the house at the weekend and I wasn't taking pills, I made a fair conclusion that she was taking them. On Monday, I told her that I would be working from home. She went to the office and I took the opportunity to get the flash drives from all the cameras and check them. The camera in the bathroom confirmed that she had indeed taken pills, but the real surprise was on the camera in the bedroom. On Saturday night, while I was cooking dinner, she went to take a shower. In the bedroom, I saw that she was using her phone to text someone. There was nothing on the phone I cloned, so she must have a second phone. It definitely wasn't in her bag, so where is it? I watched what she was doing to him when she finished writing the message. She went to the ventilation duct and, releasing the latch, opened it, hiding the phone inside. I immediately went and checked the air duct and found that the phone was not there. She should hide it there when she's at home, but he takes it with him when he leaves. I needed access to this phone. It was the first concrete proof that she was up to something, although I still didn't know what it was. There were signs that she was cheating, but it wasn't accurate. I watched the footage of her getting dressed that morning and saw her take the phone out of the ventilation unit and put it in her bag before leaving for the day. I needed this phone. In the evening, when she returned home, I watched her closely. She casually dropped her bag in the hallway and continued her usual evening lifestyle. After dinner, she went to take a shower, and I looked in her bag. There was no phone there. She must have taken it with her and hidden it in the ventilation unit when she went upstairs. She didn't know or didn't care that on the other side of the vent was Sonia's room. Quietly, listening for a shower, I crept into my daughter's bedroom and opened the window on her side. There was a phone there. Grabbing it, I took it to my office and cloned it to a new phone in a couple of minutes. I returned it and had almost closed the window when I heard my wife coming out of the shower. I went over and sat down by Sonia's bed and began stroking her hair when my wife came in. "Has something happened?" "What is it?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "I like to come and sit with one or the other of them from time to time," I whispered. "Just to remind myself how lucky I am to have two such wonderful children." She smiled. "You're a soft-hearted old man," she said. "Come on, let's go before you wake her up." I managed to look at the clone of the phone only the next day. That's when my world collapsed. The sound of my secretary's intercom did not penetrate inside while I sat in my office chair and looked at the cloned messages, tears streaming down my face. In the end, she apparently got tired of trying and knocked briefly before entering my office. She stuck her head out the door and saw me. Michelle, my secretary, was an impassive woman who dressed much older than her years. I would have put her between 30 and 40 years old. She was slender, with red hair and green eyes. She always dressed conservatively, in clothes that would be appropriate on someone much older. Our relationship has always been 100% professional. I never even raised an eyebrow in her direction, although I saw the result when someone did it. It was ugly. I had to talk to one of my business partners who was known as an office ladies' man. He flirted with her because he couldn't stand the thought of a woman who wouldn't succumb to his charms. She told me unequivocally that if he didn't quit, she would quit and sue the company not only for constructive dismissal, but also for harassment. She told me that the only reason she hasn't done it yet is because I've always treated her with respect and never done anything I shouldn't have done. My business partner was furious and wanted to fire her immediately. He gave us an ultimatum. Either she leaves or he does. So I became the owner of 60% of the company's shares instead of the 40% I started with. I was one less partner. When Michelle saw me, she immediately left, obviously to sort out what she was trying to call me about. I heard voices in my outer office, and then everything went quiet. Michelle returned to my office, closed and locked the door. Then she came over and pulled out a chair on the other side of my desk, sat down a meter away from me and facing me. She took out some napkins from a place where women always seem to have a supply and handed them to me. I took them blindly and started wiping my eyes. "Tell me," was all she said. I showed her the phone. There were text messages from Caroline, and in response. The other side was not named. No names were used, but they talked about secret meetings and a love that seemed to last forever. Whoever it was knew her well, talked about things that only I should have known about the little mole on the inside of her thigh, about the sweet squeak she made. There were other details that only a lover could know, and not just a casual lover, a long-term lover. I was never mentioned in any of the texts. It was as if I didn't exist. There was no, "Did he get out of the way?" or "Did he say or do this or that?" I just wasn't there. There was not even an extraneous thought. "Do you know who?" "What is it?" she asked, still being businesslike. I shook my head. "How did you know?" "What is it?" she asked. I told her about finding a small silver bookmark on the bathroom floor, then about the pills. The story just flowed like a river. The whole time I was talking, she just sat there and looked at me. After a while, I realized that she was holding my hand. This was the first time I thought that we had actually touched each other. "You need more information," she said. "The DNA of the children will be received on Wednesday. Can you hold out until that time?" "I don't know," I said. She nodded. "Our producers in Portland need to see you urgently," she said. "I've booked you on the next flight. You'll be back on Thursday." "I can't think about it right now." "That's what you're going to tell Caroline," she said. She took my phone, typed a text message, and sent it to Caroline. "Something happened in Portland. We need to go and figure it out. I'll be back on Thursday. I love you." The answer came almost instantly. "Good. Let me know that you got there. I'll see you when you get back." She stared at the phone for a second, curling her lips, then returned my phone to me and took out her own. "Lorraine," she said. "Michelle." "Yes, thanks. When are you free this afternoon?" "Great. See you then." "Go get yourself cleaned up," she said to me in a businesslike manner. The tone of her voice and the fact that I was almost conditioned by her to do what she told me in the office meant that I did exactly that. It was actually good when you didn't have to think, postponing decisions and plans to someone else. When I came out of the bathroom, she was holding my jacket. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You have an appointment with an old friend of mine. she said. I just went. Lorraine, it turned out, was Michelle's best friend, as well as a divorce lawyer. She was apparently dealing with Michelle's divorce when she discovered that her husband was copulating with one of his employees. Michelle was explaining the situation to Lorraine, and I was looking at it, almost in a state of stupor. It wasn't happening to me. Lorraine has obviously seen this many times in her career. As soon as she got all the facts we had, she turned her attention to me. "Gary," she said. It wasn't me. She was talking to someone else. I felt a pain in my cheek. Michelle slapped me in the face. I woke up from a surprise. I saw the shock and amusement in Lorraine's eyes, but they quickly disappeared when she looked at me. "Gary, what is it?" she asked. I nodded. "Do you have any idea what you want to do with it?" At these words, my engineer's brain woke up. Plans were what he was good for. "Kill them both," I said. I expected at least shocked exclamations from Michelle, but surprisingly, she even chuckled. "All right," Lorraine said. "I understand that, but unfortunately this is not an option. You see, it's against the law. However, we have several legitimate options. Let's look at them. Before I start," she said, "I'm just laying out your options. I am not advocating for any of them. This may happen later. The first option is to do nothing. She doesn't know that you know, but as far as I understand, you've had quite a happy life, and that shouldn't change. Keep up the good work. Play in ignorance. Secondly, an amicable divorce. Submit a statement of irreconcilable differences. Divide your company, house, 401k. She earns less than you, so you'll probably have to pay alimony for her upkeep for a few years at least, and for the children until they graduate from high school. Thirdly, act nuclear. Sue for adultery. If the children are not yours, sue for a false birth certificate. Sue the person who is the other party for alienation of affection, if he is the father. Sue to get back all the money you spent on the children. If it is a work colleague, sue for non-compliance with the fraternization policy. Nowadays, almost every company has such a policy. If the other party is married, provide her partner with all the information about the betrayal. If she knows, then we may have a case against her. If not, then maybe I can represent her in the divorce. Make it public. Tell everyone, friends, relatives, colleagues. If she is a member of any societies or church groups, tell them too. Humiliate her with all your might. We need to protect your assets. Sell your stake in the company to an offshore trust. Mortgage the house. Take everything you can. Take the cash along with the money you receive from the company. Cash out your 401k and have a party in Vegas. My thoughts whirled through my head. I instantly understood what she was saying. Option 1 was not an option. I wasn't anyone's willing cuckold. I've been a weak-willed, unconscious cuckold for too long. Option 2? Not a chance. I spent too much time building a business and creating the lifestyle we had. She can forget about taking half of everything I have and then keep letting me support her while she makes love to someone else. Option 3, I said. Nuclear. Lorraine smiled. Good. Then I'll start processing the documents. I would suggest starting covert surveillance of your wife and trying to figure out who, when, and where. We really need more evidence. Can I keep this phone? You can see that he is not doing you any good. I nodded and handed her the phone. Michelle and I left Lorraine's office and she drove me to a small family hotel. She booked me a room. Go take a shower and order something in the room, she said. She took full responsibility. I'll be back later with some things for you. I acted mechanically. My whole world was falling apart, and I was sitting in a hotel room and ordering room service as if I was on a walk. It was the only way I could deal with the stress of what was happening. 9 years in the toilet. What really hurt was that I was completely oblivious to all this. How did I not notice what she was doing? Who was it? Was it the boss she returned to after each child? She told me that she liked her job and independence, but was that the real reason? Or was she just unable to stay away from her lover for so long? I looked speculatively at the minibar and was about to give in when Michelle came into the room. Don't even think about it, she said. I need you to think, not drown your sorrows. You need to plan, and you can't do that if you look at the world through the bottom of a bottle. Planning? I asked sullenly. I've tried it. I had a plan, and it was a good plan. I had a loving wife and 2 great kids, and now look where I am. I have a cheater as my wife, and I don't even know if these 2 children belong to me. I'm the biggest cuckold in the world. My whole life has fallen apart, and you want me to plan everything? She looked at me for a few moments. I was waiting for her to say something, maybe sympathize with me, maybe even hug me. Then she looked at her watch. Okay, she said, all businesslike. The pity party is over. How many times when we started a company did you run into obstacles and your plans failed? What does this have to do with... How much? She insisted. I do not know, I said. A whole bunch. There was a time when the patent office lost a patent application for an inversion thread, and we won this deal from Headingley's. There was a time when the bank tried to foreclose on us ahead of schedule because they were under pressure. There was a time... All right, she said. At what point in all those times did you sit down, put your head in your hands, and give up? That was different. Why? What is it? She asked. What was different in those days? I had something to fight for back then, I said. I had a family that depended on me. I had one. You have a family now, she said. That also depends on you. And it's much bigger than the family you have at home. 141 people and their families depend on how you handle it. None of your partners are able to keep the company afloat. You're all engineers, but of the three of you, you're the only businessmen. If you lose, the company loses. Do you think this fool cares about the families that depend on your company? If she gets half, she'll sell it to the highest bidder, and you'll lose control of the business. You know who's going to buy it, and Headlings will own everything you've been working on. Is this what you want? I stared at her. She was right. I've worked too long and hard to let all this go to someone who will give that cheating wife of mine more money. I needed to put everything in order to ensure my future and the future of my family. If the kids were mine, I'd make sure they were taken care of. But as for Caroline, well, she made her own bed and could use whoever she wanted in it. I can grieve for this relationship when I'm sure everything else is okay. My confusion dissipated, and driven by anger and determination, I sat down with Michelle and started making plans. I was going to secure the future of the company and take care of the only family I had left. It was at the moment when I made this decision that everything fell into place. The pain was gone. The indecision was gone. I had no doubts. Michelle saw the change in my expression and nodded in satisfaction. That's the kind of Gary I need right now, she said. Someone who knows how to plan for the future. We spent the rest of the evening making plans about how to secure the company's future. At first, I was in favor of selling my shares in the company to partners, but Michelle rejected this idea. She believed that I could not entrust them with the management of the company or leave it in my hands when they become majority shareholders. They will destroy it to the ground. I need to keep control. As a result, we decided that we could create an offshore trust to which I would sell the company at a market price. Then I would stay in the same trust as a minimum wage CEO. I would earn practically nothing. Since the trust was offshore, the courts would not have jurisdiction over its documents, so the owners of the trust would not be known. I was a millionaire now, at least on paper, or I will be when all this is done. I needed to get rid of all this capital. I also needed to cash out my 401k and release all the equity around the house. Although we were together when we bought the house, it was issued only in my name. Since Caroline was not working at the time of purchase, she was carrying James, and the mortgage consultant told us that it would be easier to apply for a loan in my name, since she was not earning at that time. I made a list of what I needed to do and wrote to my lawyer, who handled the company's legal issues, to make an appointment for the next day. After Michelle left, I took a shower and went to bed, not expecting to sleep for a long time. I passed out almost as soon as my head hit the pillow, and I didn't sleep until the alarm clock on my phone woke me up the next day. There was a message from Caroline on my phone. You didn't inform me about your arrival. Is everything all right? Sorry, I was planning to stay up late. Then he fell asleep. Everything is coming together now. I have to come back on Thursday. Good. See you later. I love you. X. I have not responded to this message. I just couldn't bring myself to type those words. Michelle knocked on my door a little after 8. I took a shower again and was just thinking about going to breakfast. Breakfast, she said, indicating that I should follow her. We went to a diner on the next street and sat in a booth eating bacon and pancakes with maple syrup. Part of me couldn't figure out why I was acting like this. As if my world hadn't collapsed and my heart hadn't burst out. I reasoned like this. At some point when the dust settles, all this will come crashing down on me. However, I didn't want that, and in the meantime, I had to work. Brian Spencer, Michelle said, naming my lawyer, called and said he had time at 10 to meet with us. We can go to your bank first and cash out your 401k and also release the capital from your house before we go there. I understand that it's worth consolidating my money, I said, but there is still a record that I had all this. Can't the court just oblige me to pay her half? Only if you still have them, Michelle chuckled. That's where Vegas comes to the rescue. As soon as you have all this capital, you'll go and spend a week in Vegas and spend a lot of money. And all this before you file for divorce. Thus, when you are judged in court, you will be poor. In debt, actually. The bank will foreclose on your house and your salary will barely be enough to live on. That's assuming the kids aren't yours. If they are yours, then you will simply transfer your entire 401k to their trust management, to their college fund. Caroline won't be able to touch him. Technically, she will earn more than you. She can afford the house on her own, and she may even end up paying you alimony. When will you get the DNA results? The company said that the results should appear on the internet sometime today, I said, picking up the phone. I checked the email that the company sent me. There was a link that I clicked on. It started to load, but then I put the phone down. I wasn't sure I was ready to see the result yet. May I? Michelle asked, and I pushed the phone towards her. She took it and looked at the screen, scrolling it up several times. I watched her face, looking for clues, trying to guess from her expression what she might say. She looked up from the phone. The results are not ready yet, she said. According to tracking data, they should be received within the next 12 hours. I exhaled, which I didn't even know I was doing. Come on, she said, getting up. The bank should be open by now. Freeing up the capital at home and cashing out my 401k took surprisingly little time. I closed all our savings accounts, including children's college funds, and transferred the money to an account that I opened in my name. The only account I left alone was the joint account that we use daily. In any case, there were less than $10,000 in this account. My lawyer put a huge paddle in our plans, but if it can be done in a good way, he did it. You're forgetting one thing, he said when we explained our plan to him. You have a prenuptial agreement. Do I have any? I was surprised. I had no idea. It was a condition of the partnership agreement when you started working, he reminded me. All partners had to sign a prenuptial agreement that would protect the company in the event of a breakup. It applies only to the company, but it does not have any rights to the company's assets. For the purposes of the divorce, you are an employee of the company, and therefore, in the best case, she can claim your salary and 401k. That's all. What I would suggest, he said, and I don't want to say anything bad about your divorce lawyer's plan, is to use all the capital you've freed up from the house and the 401k and invest in the company. Buy out one of your partners. I know that Robert hinted at a desire to make money. You don't have enough funds to do this, but you could take out a loan from the company's pension fund to make up the difference. Payments will be made from your salary, which means that your income will be much less when you are assessed for assets, and since everything else will be related to the company, this is inviolable. Your credit score will suffer when the bank forecloses on your house, and you will lose half of everything left in your bank. But other than that, she will get nothing. We can make your salary less than hers, so she can even end up paying you alimony. What am I going to live on? I asked. If my entire salary is going to be related to loan repayments, I'll still need somewhere to live and eat, not to mention that I have 2 more children. And I paused. At least I think so. Let's wait with the kids, he said. Have you already decided what to do if they are not yours? Will you still be involved in their lives? I don't know, I said. It's too horrible a thought to think about. I will have to wait until I know for sure before making such decisions. Don't forget about the other parts of your plans, about the other lawyers, he reminded me. I'm willing to bet that you will receive enough money from the lawsuit against her company to pay off the loan and return to receiving a full salary when it's over. Not to mention demanding back the expenses from the father of the children if it turns out that they are not yours. Since this will happen after the divorce, it will not be considered part of the settlement agreement. Could you contact Robert on my behalf and find out if he is interested in selling? I'm not sure I'm capable of that right now. He nodded. I'll call him and then I'll let you know. We shook hands and left his office. I felt relieved when we left the building. Plans began to converge, which always gave me a feeling of deep satisfaction. Then I remembered why we had made these plans. My relief disappeared, and I felt an emptiness in my chest. We were sitting in a diner having lunch when I dared to look at my phone again. Again, I couldn't bring myself to do more than click on the link in the email before handing over Michelle's phone. Again, I watched her face, waiting for a reaction that would tell me whether I had become a father or not. "I'm sorry, Gary," she said softly. That was the most undivided response I've ever heard. She handed me the phone and I read the results myself. None of the children were biologically mine, even though they had the same father. It just wasn't me. The double blow of losing both my children was replaced by the rage I felt at the betrayal. Not only did she marry these two children to mine, but she also convinced me to have a vasectomy, which meant that now I couldn't have children of my own. "Gary!" Michelle snapped, bringing me back to myself. "Now is not the time or the place. Get a grip on yourself. We'll get through this, I promise." I took a few deep breaths, suppressing my anger. I really wanted to cause serious physical damage to someone. I even thought about hiring a hitman and killing the bastard who gave birth to the children that were supposed to belong to me. Michelle pulled herself together again and led me out of the diner. "Lorraine called," she said. "She wants to see you," and we headed to Lorraine's office. Lorraine looked glum when we entered her office. "I have a preliminary report from a private investigator," she said. "Obviously, Caroline didn't waste any time. Last night, a man came to your house and stayed the night. We couldn't look inside. I have cameras installed in the house," I said. "I can go swap the flash drives and we can see what happened." "All right," she said. "Go and do it now, and then we can make a plan." I assume that the information on these flash drives will be important. "There will be an au pair there," I said. "I can't go back. I'm supposed to be out of town on business." Lorraine checked her phone. "The au pair is at the play center with Sophie and James right now," she said. "I'll keep an eye on her and let you know if she comes out." My house was about a 30-minute drive from Lorraine's office, and Michelle was driving fast. We got there without incident, and I changed the flash drives. I quickly examined the house, but saw nothing untoward. Then we went back to Lorraine's office. We checked the flash drives. I decided not to look at the one in the bedroom. I didn't need to see what was going on there. It was clear that we were talking about a man as soon as he walked through the door. As I suspected, it was her boss, the man she worked for the whole time we were together, Bill Wainwright. It almost killed me what happened when he drove up to the house. First of all, he had his own key, and he went into the house. When he entered, James looked up and saw him. "Daddy Bill!" he exclaimed and ran to hug him. It freed my hands. I broke down and started crying. I couldn't watch anymore. Lorraine watched me break down. Michelle, for the first time ever, hugged me and held me while I cried. It took a while, but in the end I pulled myself together. "Do you want to get some rest?" Lorraine asked, and I shook my head. The pain receded a little, but the anger began to take hold of me again. "What's next?" I asked. "I already have a copy of the terms of employment at your wife's firm. There is a non-fraternization clause there, so you have a case against the company for violating it. Since the person with whom your wife is fraternizing is a top manager of the company cannot claim in any way that she did not know about what was happening." We explained to Lorraine what my company's lawyer had told me, and his advice. She broke into a huge smile. She picked up the phone and called him, asking for copies of the prenuptial agreement, and he emailed them to her. "It's just perfect," she said, reading the prenuptial agreement. "Drop everything I said before. Your boyfriend's plan is absolutely correct. If your partner wants to get rid of the company, buy it out. Invest everything you have in the company, and it will immediately make it inaccessible to her. We can sue her company for non-compliance with the court's decision, him for alienation of affection, her for a false statement on the birth certificate, and both of them for the money spent on children so far. The deduction only for medical bills for childbirth amounts to a significant amount. It all depends on whether Robert wants to sell out," I said. "I think we'll have to wait until he comes back with an answer." Michelle drove me back to the hotel and I went up to the room. I was about to sit on the bed when there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw that she was standing in the hallway. "Come on," she said. "You can't stay here." "What?" I asked. "Why?" "Because you can't be alone," she said. "You will only think or attack the minibar. I want you to be somewhere where I can keep an eye on you." While she was talking, she packed up my few things. She took my hand and led me out of the room, then examined me and led me to her car. "Where are we going?" I asked, finding that I didn't care. "To my house," she said. "I have a spare room that you can use." "But," I began. She turned her head and looked at me. I fell silent. I had never been to Michelle's house and was surprised to see that it was almost the same size as mine. Our house was 2 stories high, while hers had only 1 floor. She led me into a room with a bathroom. "Take a shower and change," she ordered. "Dinner's in 30 minutes. We ate dinner in silence. I guess it was delicious, but I didn't feel it. My mind was busy with a swirl of thoughts that couldn't calm down. I was furious, but I couldn't find the strength to express it. I was devastated, but I couldn't find the strength to worry. All I had enough energy for now was to carry out my plans. I was on autopilot. My destination was determined. I was just thinking about what to do after eating when the phone rang. Startled, I hoped it wasn't Caroline. It wasn't Caroline. "Hi, Robert," I said listlessly. "Why?" That's all he asked. Robert and I have been friends since university. We studied together, and it was the project we worked on together that gave us the foundation to start a business. At first, I got most of the company because I had more capital to invest than he did. "Caroline is cheating on me," I said in a wooden voice. "All this time." "All this time," he said incredulously. "You mean, none of the children are mine," I told him. There was silence on the other end of the phone. "So you want to link all your assets to the company and hide behind a prenuptial agreement?" he asked. Either Brian Spencer, our lawyer, explained everything, or he understood the partnership agreement much better than I did. "I want to keep 5% for myself," he said, "and stay with the company as a consulting engineer. I'll discuss the details with the HR department. The rest is yours." "All right," I said. "I'll ask Brian to prepare the documents." "Gary," he said after a moment, "I'm really sorry. I know you don't feel that way right now, but it'll get easier later. I promise. I've been pretty much where you are now, and it's really getting easier." It was only then that I remembered that he had divorced about 4 years ago. I didn't know the details because even though we were friends, he was a very private person. I just knew it wasn't very pleasant. That's how he remembered the prenuptial agreement. He used it himself. The next morning, Michelle woke me up with a cup of coffee. "Come on," she said. "We still have a lot to do." The first thing we did was go to Brian Spencer, the company's lawyer. He had already prepared all the documents for my ransom of Robert, and we completed the entire transaction in less than 30 minutes. I gave him everything I took from home, from my savings, and from my 401k. I also had to take out a loan under the company's pension plan for the remaining amount. Now, at least on paper, I was in debt for about $1 million. My salary has almost halved since the payments were deducted before taxes. Then we went to Lorraine's. I showed her all the documents on the deal, and she was delighted. "It's perfect," she said. "I will arrange the documents today, and we can submit them on Monday if you want. We will serve it to him, her, and the company at the same time." "Where do you want her to be served?" "Where it would cause her maximum embarrassment," I said. "If you could do it through a billboard at the Super Bowl, I would gladly pay for it." Lorraine laughed. "We'll serve her at the office," she said. "On Monday at 10 in the morning, provided that the papers go through the court before that time. If I send them today, then I should have them tomorrow afternoon." I nodded. "And now what?" And I looked at Michelle. She ran the business. "Now," she said, "we have 2 more stops before you go back to the office and pretend you just got back from putting out a fire in Portland. Do you think you can stay at home until Monday?" "I think I'll have to," I said. "Don't guess," she said. "Tell me what it takes to help you hold out until that time." "I don't know," I said. "Any good news?" She smiled at me. "Then let's go," she said. To my surprise, we stopped at the medical center where I underwent all the examinations and where I had a procedure that meant that from now on I would never become a father. "What are we doing here?" I asked. "Did you want good news?" she said. "Let's go." I followed her into the clinic and stood aside as she walked to the reception desk. The receptionist nodded and motioned for us to sit down. We sat down. Less than 2 minutes later, my doctor came out and invited me into the consultation room. I looked at Michelle, who made no move to follow me. "Please," I said, and she nodded and followed me. Dr. Harrington did not comment on my secretary's participation in my consultation. He knew who she was and that she wasn't my wife, because he was both my doctor and Caroline's doctor. Why I asked my secretary to come with me was my business, not his. "Gary," he said, I understand that you wanted to ask about the cancellation of the vasectomy. My eyes widened. Is this even possible? I looked at Michelle. There was a tiny smile on her face. Yes, is it possible? Of course, Dr. Harrington said. Since your vasectomy was performed 3 years ago, the percentage of successful reverse operations is about 95%. The surgery is a little longer than the initial one and involves general anesthesia, but I'm sure you'll be able to father children again once we're done. And again my eyes filled with tears. I still had a chance to become a father. It meant surgery, but it was a small price to pay for being able to have children of my own. I had no idea who I was going to have children with, but at least it was possible. I know it's hard to accept, the doctor said. Here is the information about the operation and its cost. Unfortunately, it will not be covered by your insurance. If you want to continue, let me know and we can schedule you for an examination. Thank you, doctor, Michelle said, standing up and taking the information from him. We'll be in touch. Standing up, I also let her take me out of the clinic and head to her car. Is that good enough news? What is it? She asked, smiling gently at me. In a fit of passion, I hugged her and hugged her to me. Thanks, I said, burying my face in her hair. Then I realized what I had done. Instantly releasing her, I stepped back. I'm so sorry, I said. Gary, she said softly. It's all right. We got into her car. One more stop, then back to the office, she said. I've been to Bill Wainwright's house several times over the years that Caroline worked for him. He and his wife, Stephanie, lived in a nice neighborhood near the city. It was a closed village. They held some corporate events here. Why? I asked. Michelle just got out of the car and went to the door of the house. I followed her. She didn't even have to knock. Stephanie was informed by the guard who led us into the territory that we were already on our way, and she stood at the door and waited for us. Gary, she greeted. You must be Michelle, his secretary? Was it you who called? Yes, and that's me, Michelle replied. Come on in, Stephanie said. She led us into a study-like room next to the hallway. I've never been in this room. Judging by the photos on the table and on the wall, it was Bill's office, but she sat down at the table and pointed to the chairs opposite. It looks like she decided it wasn't a personal call. How can I help you? Stephanie asked, looking at me. I sat and stared at her, unable to speak. Did you know? I finally asked. Stephanie sighed sadly. No, she said. I suspected, but I didn't know. I could never find any evidence, nothing that I could take to a lawyer. Otherwise, I would have taken every penny that bastard has from him. Get in line, Michelle muttered. Do you have any proof? Stephanie asked, and I nodded. Proof that none of my children are mine, that they have the same father. A video of him with Caroline in my house, where my son calls him PA. I couldn't finish this sentence. The lump threatened to suffocate me, and I was lost again. Oh, Gary, I'm so sorry, she said. I've suspected for years that he and Caroline were together. But he was so careful. I followed him, checked his phone, email. I even challenged him, but he managed to convince me that I was just being paranoid. The cops I used didn't find anything. Honestly, if I was sure, if I had proof, I would have come to you right away. But I couldn't ruin what looked like a happy marriage based on mere suspicion. I needed to be sure, and I still couldn't get any proof. What are you going to do? What is it? She asked. I wondered if I should tell my enemy's wife about my plans. It is unknown if she will tell him everything as soon as he returns home. It was probably too late for him to do anything meaningful, but I wanted it to be as much of a shock to him as it was to me. The question is, what are you going to do? I asked. Now you have proof. She smiled a little at that. I understand, she said. And I don't blame you. I wouldn't say that either. If you have the name of a good divorce lawyer, I would appreciate it. Michelle took a business card out of her purse and handed it to her. Thank you, she said. Will a week be enough? I nodded. Great, she said. I'll get in touch with... She showed the card, and I agree with her. She stood up. Obviously, our meeting was over. Michelle and I stood up. Stephanie came over and hugged me briefly, giving me a peck on the cheek. Once again, I'm really sorry, she said. Look after him, she said to Michelle, who flinched when she hugged me. He deserves better than what that fool did to him. We returned to the office, and I spent the rest of the day finishing up the things I had to do while I was in Portland. At the end of the day, I drove home. Michelle knocked on my door at her usual time, looked in and said she was going home. She's back to being the professional she always was. This also caused me to feel a sense of loss. It seemed to me that I was starting to get closer to her, but it must have been just my imagination. I wished her a good night, thanking her for her help. I worked late at the office. I had a lot of catching up to do. A message from Caroline arrived around 8. "What time will you be home?" "Probably another hour or two. I need to finish something after the trip. I'll probably be asleep by now. I have to get up early in the morning. Love you. Kek." And again, I couldn't bring myself to reply to this message. I continued to work until almost 11. I really wanted her to be asleep when I got home. The less I have to talk to her, the better I'll feel. When I returned home, the house was in semi-darkness. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I looked in on Sonia and James. They were both asleep and looked as charming as ever. I felt sobs begin to form in my chest, and I had to hide in the bathroom. I couldn't let Caroline catch me crying over children who weren't even mine. I still haven't decided what to do with the kids. It's unlikely that any of them will remember me if I just walk away from them. I had no responsibility to them, but I loved them both anyway. How could I leave them when less than 48 hours ago they were my children, my flesh and blood, my pride and joy, and now they were just another proof of my cheating wife's infidelity. I decided to wait and see what happens next. In any case, the decision may not be made in my favor. I went to bed doing my best not to wake Caroline up. I didn't fall asleep right away, and when the alarm clock woke me up in the morning, Caroline had already left. When I entered, the housekeeper was in the kitchen feeding the children. I looked at her. She should have known. There's no way she didn't know that. Was she still looking at me and laughing at a stupid man who couldn't even satisfy his wife? Did she know that the children weren't even mine? Did she take the kids to say goodnight to Daddy Bill, as she did so often with me? My mind was guessing, and I imagined her and Caroline making dirty threesome love with Bill Wainwright while the kids were crying in the next room. I shook my head angrily. She knew, I decided. And on Monday I will take great pleasure in firing her. I will do everything so that this little fool will never work as an au pair again. I'll tell the agency that, wait, what am I doing? I take out my anger on someone who has little hope that everything will be right in this situation. You'll be damned if you do, and you'll be damned if you don't. If she had told me, she would have lost her job. She could have left, I reasoned, but then it seems she had feelings for our children, whom she looked after before Sonia was born. I was angry, but maybe at the wrong person. Then I went to work. When I arrived, Michelle was already in the office. It was as if the previous few days had never happened. She was all business, although I noted in my planner that she had freed up my day for what she called marketing. I settled into my office, and she brought me my morning coffee, as she had done every day for 9 years of working for me. Then she sat down on the other side of the table. It was only then that I noticed that she had brought coffee for herself. It was something she had never done before. "Marketing?" I asked. "Since when have I been doing marketing?" She grinned. It was a pretty evil grin, and for some reason it made me feel warm inside. "We need to make a plan," she said, the last part of Lorraine's strategy. I looked at her, not understanding. "What?" I said. "Tell everyone," Michelle said. "Her friends, family, church groups, volunteer groups, everyone she interacts with should know what a cheater she is and what she has done." "That doesn't make me look good," I said. "I'll be a laughingstock. A cuckold who can't even satisfy his wife is raising other people's bastards." "You have to tell your story," she said. "If you don't, Caroline will, and trust me, it will make you look a lot worse than being an ignorant cuckold. What about an abusive husband? Or someone who mistreats his children? People will believe this shit, and when we nuke her, she'll respond with everything she has. Speak out first, and people are less likely to believe any counter-accusations. Some, of course, will believe it, but nothing can be done. Michelle has put together a media package containing all the evidence of Caroline's infidelity. There was a private investigator's report, a copy of the DNA report showing that I am not the father of my 2 children. There were copies of videos taken in my house, including the one of James greeting Bill, and videos from the bedroom that I hadn't seen and didn't want to see. Later that morning, I received an email from Lorraine. Apparently, Stephanie provided her with a sample of Bill's DNA. She checked him against the DNA test I received, and it turned out that he was definitely the father of both children. I paused. Children? I thought. Suddenly I stopped thinking of them as my children. We have included this new information in the package and prepared them for shipment. They will be sent to Caroline's parents, my parents, Caroline's brother and sister, with whom I was very close. Electronic copies will be sent to all her Facebook and LinkedIn contacts, as well as to anyone else I can send them to. Those that were addressed to our next of kin, I paid the courier company for delivery at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. That's when the balloon was supposed to rise. I just needed to get through the weekend. I had a plan for how to do it. Since I am an engineer, it took me less than an hour to design and build a small device. It had a motor, a timer, and a battery. I could set it up so that the motor would rotate, creating vibration after a certain period of time. When I got home on Friday night, I hid the device under Sophie's pillow when the au pair left. It was supposed to go off at 6 the next morning, which is about the time we usually wake up. It would have woken Sophie up, and therefore our weekend morning love would have been ruled out. Everything worked perfectly. I was woken up by Sophie, who came into our room and climbed into bed with us. As a result, there is no love. I smiled to myself. I managed to keep myself busy all Saturday, doing all the things that Caroline had been demanding of me for months. When she commented on it, I just said that it was high time to do them, since she had been bothering me for so long. On Saturday evening, when Caroline unexpectedly tried to provoke me into love, I pretended to be asleep when she came out of the bathroom, and on Sunday, her daughter came back to her room, having been brought out of sleep by my device. On Sunday, we decided to go for a walk with the children and spent the whole day at the zoo. There were several times during the day when I looked at Caroline, the woman I loved, the woman I thought loved me, and the two children I cared for, thinking they were mine, and I almost broke down. I bit the inside of my cheek until it bled, trying to contain my emotions. But I got through the weekend. On Monday, I was excited. I told Caroline that I would work from home. I wanted to talk to the au pair. Caroline left for work at her usual time, poking her head into my office to tell me she was leaving. I pretended to be engrossed in my email and only grunted in response. She could hear her car pulling out of the garage and the door closing. I looked at my watch. It was 8:15. An au pair knocked on the door of my office. She wanted to take the children to the play center, but I said no, they should stay at home. This surprised her. I had never refused her before, but she just nodded and went back to the children. I heard how upset James was that he couldn't go, and he wanted to. A little after 9, Michelle drove up to the house. I was surprised, but I let her in. For the first time since I've known her, I made coffee for her. At 9:30, we had a teleconference with Lorraine. "Gary," Lorraine said, "this is your last chance to stop. I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying that if you've changed your mind over the weekend, now's the time to say it." "No," I said, "no doubt about it." "Then I'll see you on the other side," Lorraine said. Everything was ready. I've been monitoring my email inbox, waiting for the confirmation emails to arrive. At exactly 10 a.m., the first one came, the second one 3 minutes later, and the third one 5 minutes later. Then my phone rang. It wasn't Caroline, as I thought, but my mother. "Gary." "Hi, Mom," I said. "What's going on?" "What is it?" she asked. "Did you read the package I sent?" I asked. "Yes, but..." "Then you know as much as I do," I said. "Caroline cheated on me, probably my whole married life, with her boss. The children are not mine. I'm divorcing this fool." "Gary, you can't..." "No, Mom. Listen, I have to work. I have other calls." I hung up the phone. It immediately rang again. This time it was Caroline. "Gary," I didn't answer, waiting for her to continue. "We need to talk," she continued. Still no response. "I'm going home." She interrupted the call. "Caroline's on her way," I told Michelle. "I'm going to step aside," she said. I wanted to ask her to stay, but I didn't know how to do it. I just looked up at her. "Call me," she said, "when you find out what's going on." She's gone. Caroline arrived home about 20 minutes later. I heard her car pull up to the house. She didn't even bother to pull into the garage. I didn't know what to expect when she entered the house. I didn't know if she would come in with a gun in her hand or slip in with her tail between her legs. Anyway, she came into my office and sat down across from me at the table. "Gary, she began. "It's not interesting," I interrupted her. "But I'm not interested," I said. "You don't even want to..." "No," I said. "I don't want to hear a single fucking word out of your mouth. You've been lying to me for 9 fucking years. None of the kids are mine, but you convinced me to have a vasectomy while you were still taking the pills so you could continue with Daddy Bill. At these words, her eyes widened. So no, Caroline, I continued. I'm not interested in what you want to say. My lawyer's card is in the package you received when you were served. If you have something that you think I should know, talk to her. What about the children? What is it? She asked. What kind of children? I replied. I don't have children, and if it were up to you, I would never have them. I would ask why you did this to me, but I don't want to hear another lie. I'm not interested in your excuses, justifications, or reasons. I want it all to end so that I can collect what's left of my life and move on. I called the housekeeper into the room. She could hear me because my office door was open and she was only in the next room. You're fired, I said, immediately. Get your shit together and fuck off. What? She said. Why? Because you were covering for her, I said, pointing at Caroline. You knew she was making love to her boss, and I don't know if you knew the kids belonged to him and not me, but you definitely knew what was going on. I have video evidence of you talking to Bill about the kids. Get out. Gary, Caroline said, you can't fire her. I pay her salary. The au pair looked at Caroline with an expression of gratitude in her eyes. All right, I said. I have already contacted the agency and informed them that you were complicit in an extramarital affair and agreed not to take any action against their company if they deregistered you. So if Caroline wants to keep you, she will not only have to pay you, but also take care of all other things, such as taxes, vacation, pension, illness, not to mention insurance. The au pair's face lost color. Not only did she lose her job, but she was deleted from the agency's accounting department. It would make it almost impossible for her to find another housework job. The agencies were talking to each other. Now get out, I said, and she ran away. Did you have to do that? Caroline said. She shouldn't have. You're talking again, I said. I told you I didn't want to hear it. What I want is for you to get your stuff, get your kids, and get out of my house. This is my house too, she said. According to the documents, no, I said. It is registered in my only name. So until the courts find otherwise, get out of here. She jumped slightly when I shouted. James entered the room. Mommy, he said. Sonia fell down. Caroline, with a stunned expression and tears on her cheeks, got up and went to her daughter. I closed the door of my office and stayed inside while she packed her things. A few minutes later, she returned, holding Sonia in her arms. Are you going to say goodbye to Sonia? Not that, I said. She's not my daughter, and he's not my son. Take them to Daddy Bill and let him take care of his offspring. They have nothing to do with me. Gary, Get out! The front door was heard closing, and a few minutes later, her car started up. She's gone. I let out a breath that I had been holding for what seemed like forever, and it shattered. I didn't hear the door open and jumped when a pair of arms wrapped around me, and I fell, putting my head in my hands. When I looked up, I saw that Michelle was holding me. She pulled me to her and hugged me while I sobbed. It took me a while to pull myself together again. I just threw away 9 years. My marriage, my children, my life are gone. I really didn't want to look at the world anymore. Michelle took matters into her own hands again. Come on, she said. Lorraine said it would take Caroline about 4 hours to get an emergency warrant to occupy the house. Because she has children, and this is a marital home, she'll be back. Do you really want to please her by kicking you out of your own house? We collected some of my clothes and all the important documents. I had to figure out where to stay, but I loaded my car and Michelle's car with my things and left. First, we went to the office where I was served later that day. Lorraine called me to wait for the delivery. There was not only an order to occupy the house, but also a restraining order, meaning that I was forbidden to approach the house closer than 100 meters. If I want to pick something up, I'll have to make an appointment and be accompanied by Caroline's lawyer at my expense. Without realizing what was going on, I found that I had moved into Michelle's spare room. All my clothes were in the wardrobe, and all my papers are now neatly stacked in the cabinets in the office. It's been a week since Caroline submitted. I was working, and then I went back with Michelle to her house to eat and then sleep. In the morning, she would bring me coffee, make breakfast, and then we would go to the office together. Nothing seemed to have changed between us. She was still busy, and apart from hugging me when I broke down at home on the first day, I never smiled at her. However, I had nothing to smile about anyway. On Monday morning, we had an appointment with the lawyers of the company where Caroline and Bill worked. I didn't know the details, but apparently we filed a lawsuit for an amount that the company couldn't afford. They had insurance, but its maximum amount was $1 million, and we filed a claim for an amount significantly higher than that. Their lawyers were businesslike. Lorraine, my lawyer, was grinning like a Cheshire cat. "What needs to be done?" their lawyer asked, "for you to agree to this?" "Immediate and final dismissal, with loss of pension of the senior participant," Lorraine replied, "as well as the obligation to keep Caroline on staff for at least 3 years, and $1.5 million. I didn't really listen while they were exchanging words. In the end, they agreed to all of the above, but I'll only get $750,000. This, at least, will allow me to repay some of the debt that I had to the company's pension fund. "All this will be paid after the divorce is finalized," Lorraine said. They nodded. They understood. Lorraine stayed with us at the next meeting. It was a meeting with Bill Wainwright's lawyers. I came out of their office, $500,000 richer. Now I had enough money to pay off the pension fund loan in full, and at the same time, I still had a small amount on hand, or I would have after the divorce. My last meeting that day was with Caroline's lawyers. Caroline was with them in the office, but she didn't look at me when I walked in. Michelle was with me, as was Lorraine. "This accounting in the divorce application is ridiculous," Caroline's lawyer began. "Your client is the main shareholder and CEO of a company whose value, according to recent estimates, is about $20 million. Not to mention the assets in the house, savings, and 401k. I'm offering—" "Let me stop you there," Lorraine said, pulling a sheaf of papers out of her briefcase. "According to the prenuptial agreement signed by all parties, the company is not the subject of a divorce. My client recently made significant additional investments in the company, which took most of his savings, his entire 401k, and a loan secured by a house. He also had to take out a loan from the company's pension fund. One of the partners wanted to get rid of the company, and it was important that the shares did not fall into the hands of a competitor who has been trying to take over the business for several years. Since the loan from the pension fund means that he now has a reduced salary, he is now paid less than your client, and I will ask the court to conclude some kind of maintenance agreement so that he can hold out until he finds himself." "What about the children?" her lawyer asked. "There is DNA evidence that these children are not his," Lorraine said, "that she deliberately forged birth records to identify my client as the father, with the intention of deceiving. In addition, and this is a separate issue, we are going to recover damages for a serious assault when she deliberately persuaded him to undergo surgical sterilization, which he agreed to, believing that he was the father of the children. The alternative is for your client to sign the divorce application as is, pack her things, and leave the marital home in his hands. She will receive half of the joint account, the balance of which at the moment is $9,443.15. The lawyer looked at the papers, at the prenuptial agreement, and then at Caroline. For the first time, she looked at me. "Gary, please," she said. 9 years, I said. 9 fucking years. You've been lying to me for 9 years, day in and day out. You have nothing to tell me that I want to hear. Caroline looked at her lawyer and nodded. She signed the papers. I wasn't there when she left the house. I just received a letter from her lawyer saying that the injunction has been lifted and the house is now mine. I can come back to the house at any time. I thought about it, but decided against it. Instead, I put the house up for sale. It didn't quite match the amount owed to the bank, but I made up the difference, and the bank left satisfied. 2 months had passed, and I was still living in Michelle's spare room. After our divorce, Caroline moved in with her parents. Despite all the evidence I provided, they were firmly on her side and did not talk to me. For me, it wasn't a loss. For some reason, Stephanie didn't divorce Bill as promised. I didn't know why, and I didn't want to find out. Since he lost his job at the company and his pension, they had to sell the house in a gated community and move into a small apartment. Bill still had the connections and skills to work in the market, so he managed to find an acceptable job and earned a living, although not in the same way as before. I don't know if they met with Caroline. I haven't seen her since that day at her lawyer's office, and I wasn't interested in it. I was sitting at my desk at work when Michelle knocked and entered the room without waiting for an answer. "Bill Wainwright is dead," she said without preamble. "What?" I asked. "How? Apparently Stephanie caught him with Caroline again," she said. "She shot him." I leaned back in my chair. A huge grin appeared on my face. I tried to remove it, but I couldn't. "Nothing could have happened to a nicer guy," I finally said. Michelle laughed. "Am I angry?" I asked her. "For being happy about it?" "Not at all," Michelle said. That bastard got what he deserved. By the way, this has just been delivered. She put an official envelope on my desk. I looked at him in awe. We both knew what was there. I took it and opened it. That's it, I said. I'm finally a free man. Finally, Michelle said. Then she did what I least expected. She kissed me. It wasn't a peck on the cheek or even on the lips. It was a full-fledged kiss with tongue, with lips, with curling fingers. When she finally released me, I leaned back in my chair, gasping, amazed and tense, like the mainmast of a T-clipper. She giggled, looking down and seeing my obvious excitement. For 9 years, she said, I've been taking care of you. You're the most perfect man I've ever met. You never even looked at me the wrong way, didn't check my legs or ass, didn't touch me, and I loved you for that. I've been waiting for you for 9 years, and now you're free. I know that you have always respected me, and this is also a kind of love. We're a great team. I know you as well as any wife knows her husband, and if you think about it, you know me the same way. Give me a chance to show you that not all women are lying, changeable, insidious bitches, please. I was stunned. I remembered all the time I spent with her before I found out about the betrayal, and I thought about how I felt about her. I fervently defended her against my business partner, to the point that he was kicked out of business. That's when I realized that I had and still have real feelings for Michelle. I realized that it is impossible to work closely with someone for so long and not develop something. While I was with Caroline, there was no need to explore these feelings, evaluate them. But now there was definitely such a need. Do you have anything to say? She said. There was an expression of concern on her face. It was the first time I saw her unsure. How much? I asked. She looked puzzled. How much of what? What is it? She asked. Children, I said. How many children should we have?